these appeals is that they are very different to any other legal forum in England and Wales. Now, I'm going to pause there because, is there anybody here from Wales? Or resides in Wales? Well, there's lucky, as they say. Because the Welsh SEN system is very different now to the English system. It used to be the same, but it's now different. So if you have a child or you think about moving to Wales, the system is different. My advice would be don't think about moving to Wales because the system there is much worse for children and parents. So you are better off in England, without a shadow of a doubt. So everything that I've said today about SEN law and tribunals does only apply to England, okay? Now they're very, very different. And in the past, I have dealt with, or in my younger days, I've dealt with criminal cases. I still deal with family cases, particularly where there's an SEN sort of crossover. Housing cases, immigration cases, mental health. I'm trying to think if there's any other area of law that I dealt with in my early days. Nothing prepares you for an SEN tribunal because they are so different. It is not like Rumpole of the Bailey. People don't sort of get cross-examined and give evidence on those. It is the tribunals deal with it on an issue-by-issue basis, and it is very different. Tribunals will usually, at the start, say these are the issues we're going to deal with today, and it may be, for example, sensory difficulties and the delivery of OT is an issue. It may be social communication is an issue and the extent of speech language is an issue, and then finally they might be dealing with school placement as well as possibly social care. But they will deal with it issue by issue. At the start of the tribunal, the tribunal will make it very clear about what issues they want to hear from. And usually, when they're dealing with it issue by issue, the local authority might give evidence first of all. Oh, Jemima doesn't have any sensory issues, they have no problems whatsoever. And then the parents may perhaps be able to say, well, we got an OT report, we rely on the OT report, which sets out the sensory issues. So it's issue by issue. People are not cross-examined, you can ask questions, mustn't interrupt. There are 3 people on the panel. The chair is a judge, who you can call judge now. We've recently had directions that you can call them judge. So it's not your honour. If it's a man, you can call them sir, and if it's a woman, you can call them mom, but it's generally judge is an easier word, I think. There'll be 2 wing members generally. They're meant to have expertise in dealing with children or people with special needs. So they could be previous SENCOs, specialist teachers, head teachers of a special school in the past or something, could be paediatricians, it could be medics that have previously dealt with or dealing with children with special needs. Also, had someone who, because they were from Hereford, although they lived a long way away, I knew that they were a specialist social worker for disabled children in their life. That was sheer chance. There could be OTs or speech and language therapists. So they have a range of backgrounds. And a lot of them are very good, actually. They understand special needs, the wing members, because they have a background in special needs. The judge only has a background in law. There will be a lawyer, solicitor or barrister, usually solicitor. Usually, before they come to the SEN tribunal, they don't have any experience or expertise of SEN law. So when they begin, they're usually fairly hopeless. But hopefully they pick it up quite quickly. But some of the judges, when they're first appointed, in my view, they're a bit thrown. They don't really understand how it all works. But they have the 2 wing members to put them right. Prior to the tribunal hearing, about 2 weeks before, the local authority will produce a tribunal bundle which has all of the documents in that you as a parent have submitted as well as the local authority. First thing you do is check all of your documents are in, because unfortunately the local authority very odd really, but when the local authority are preparing the bundle, they often miss out bits of parents' evidence. don't know why, but it happens so often, so you need to check it. At the start of the tribunal will always start at 10 on the dot. One of the things to remember is you need to block out the day. If you have a tribunal, it is going to be a day. You need to log into the tribunal to test your line at 9:30. You need to be available, and the tribunal will start generally 10 on the dot. It's all by video link now, by a VPP or something, I can't remember what it's called now. But it's all video link, but it's a bit more sophisticated than Teams, so ordinary folks can't just join. Remember, you're essentially, if you have a tribunal, you're in a court hearing in your living room, or your study, or your bedroom, or whatever. This means you cannot have people coming in and out of the tribunal. Only you can be there. If your young person or child wants to be present at the beginning to say a few words, or if they are post-16, something like that, they may want to be there for the whole thing. That's fine. But what you can't do is have your best mate there. What you can't do is have Auntie Gloria there. These are private proceedings, rather like a family court, so it's just you. You need to let people know that you're going to be having a court hearing that is private and confidential in your living room. Because I recently did a tribunal, it's all on screen now, so you've got about 12 little squares, and a mother and her son were sat next to each other at the table here. And then the tribunal judge is talking. From behind, we saw and somebody put down a cup of tea in front of the mother and son, and I'm sort of looking, thinking, what? And then I'm sort of looking at this thing, I don't know what's happening. Everybody else is looking, and then they tiptoe back out, and finally the judge says, Mrs. Puddle Duck, who is that person? And she said, oh, it was a neighbour. She knows what I'm doing this morning. She thought I might need a cup of tea. Even though I had said, and the judge had said at the beginning, nobody else must be present. So if you have friendly neighbours who might come in with a cup of tea, tell them no. You're in a court hearing in your living room. The other thing is, if you have any pets, when I say get rid of them, I don't mean permanently. I mean, take them, have a neighbour or a family member look after them. Because we once had a tribunal hearing where it seemed to me every time somebody walked by the house, the dog constantly barked really loudly, and the judge was just getting fed up with it. And in the end, we had to pause the tribunal hearing so that the parent could get a neighbour to take the dog for the rest of the tribunal, because it was literally, you couldn't see it, but it was barking all the time. We've had cats walk across the screen with a waving tail. And we've had chirping birds, which the judge ordered to be removed. So just think, you're in a courtroom in your living room, no pets. You can have them back later, but no pets, okay? You will get the tribunal bundle, and it will come, you should have it electronically, and you may have a paper bundle as well. I'm a bit old-fashioned. I still like a paper bundle if I'm doing contested hearing. I find it easier. I can put stickers on it. I can highlight it. I find it much easier. But at the same time, I have a screen with the bundle on in case something goes wrong. Now, you've got the hearing by screen as well. And it may be that if you've got witnesses or you're represented, you are communicating by a WhatsApp group. So you're going to have lots of devices for the hearing, and you need to be prepared. You need to have them all plugged in, because what you don't want is to suddenly disappear in your court hearing because your laptop's run out of battery. Which happened to someone recently. They thought it was plugged in and it wasn't, and suddenly they disappeared because of that. So you're going to need more, several devices. You might need, if you have a laptop, you might need several screens. You're going to have your phone for communicating. Because remember, if you're in a virtual courtroom, and either you're representative or you have a witness, if you were in an actual courtroom, you could give them a note saying, what about on the 5th of December last year, when Jemima whatever happened? You can't do that. So the only way of communicating is either by WhatsApp, which is what most people do, or by text message. So you have to have a system of communicating which other people can't see. We once did have a local authority witness who, you know, on these video things you can have a chat. So they were putting up their comments in the chat, and I was watching them, and I was first of all I was a bit puzzled, and then the judge eventually said, "Mrs. Jones, please do not put comments in the chat, which should really be directed to your local authority representative, because we can all see it." So if you're in a hearing, don't put comments in the chat, unless it's something like, "I can't hear, I can't see," or "What page was that?" Something like that, you know. Don't put things in that are just for someone, okay? Usually, as I say, you have to log in about 9:30, and generally, hearings now are being finished by 4, 4:30, maybe 5. But I say to parents, if you've got a tribunal hearing, you need to allow for being in the tribunal till 6, 6:30. So you've probably got to make arrangements for the school collection or something like that. This can all be very difficult for some parents, but you are going to be, it could be the whole day, okay? Some tribunal judges, and it's happened less and less to me, will ask a parent to give a short pen, what they call a pen portrait of their child at the beginning of a hearing. And that, you can just, you know, say what your child's like, what they don't like, what they are they outgoing, or, you know, what activities do they like. And sometimes, particularly when I attended tribunals, judges always like to see a picture, so a nice photograph of your child or young person. They haven't asked for it more recently, and that's partly because it's quite difficult to hold the photo up to the screen and us all to see it. But you might want to have a nice photo nearby. Sometimes they do ask, okay? One thing to remember is that you will not get a decision on the day, except in very exceptional circumstances. I can remember a tribunal I did pre-pandemic in Stafford, and the tribunal called myself and the lawyer for the local authority in early and said to the local authority, "You've got no case, why aren't you conceding this?" And I've suffered. And the judge made it clear that the local authority should go outside and concede it. It was a complex case with a lot of arguments over Section B and Section F, and we took till I think 6 o'clock before we sorted it, but essentially the parents knew that day the decision. But often you do not know which way a tribunal's going. Sometimes you get a feeling that a judge is hopefully on your side, but it's very difficult. So it's going to be 14 working days. Sometimes it's longer. My experience is certain judges are there's a fairly new judge there who gets the decisions out very quickly. Others, it can be 3 or 4 weeks before you get the decision, and you have parents, "Have you heard, have you heard?" But it'll come by email from the tribunal centre when you get it, but you won't get it on the day, generally. There may be things that a tribunal will indicate on the day, such as provision of OT or speech and language, but if the major issue is school placement, you might not know that on the day. So this is the sort of timeline for appeal. So you send in your appeal, it's registered, the LAA respond to the appeal, usually opposing it, sometimes they agree straight away, and then you have a date for final evidence. And you really need to sort of mark that date in your diary, and the final evidence is generally any experts' reports you've got, if you haven't done them before. Then you have, don't worry if you've got an expert or you arranged for an educational psychologist to carry out an assessment and provide a report. The report is not going to be available until after the final evidence deadline. You can submit evidence after the final evidence deadline, but what I would suggest is 2 things. One is in your final evidence you say, and by the way, I've instructed an independent psych, but they can't carry out the assessment until X day, and the report will be ready on Y day, and I intend to submit this as late evidence. And so you're letting everybody know in advance what you're doing. Then, when it comes to, you've got the report, you have to fill in what's called a SEN 7 report, 7 form, which essentially is a form that you send to the tribunal asking that you file late evidence. And you close it. Generally, something like a late evidence report, nobody objects to it being late evidence. But what happens is at the beginning of the tribunal will say, is there any late evidence from the local authority or the parent? If yes, what is it? Does anybody object? If nobody objects, it's let in. Something like a late report from an ed-psych, OT or speech and language therapist, it is unlikely that A, the local authority will object to it being late evidence, and B, that the tribunal will object to it being admitted. So don't be kind of stressed that I can't get this report before the date of final evidence, because generally you will be allowed to submit it. What the tribunal might sometimes say is, okay, the date of final evidence was the 1st of July 24. You didn't submit until the 30th of September 24. When did you instruct the ed-psych? And the tribunal would want to be sure that you didn't kind of instruct on the 1st of September. So if you're going to file late evidence, you might have to say, well, you know, I did ask for it, because as we've said already today, ed-psychs are in short supply, whether it's local authority or independent, and if you try and get an ed-psychs appointment now, you might be looking 6 months hence anyway. So, and if you've got an appeal lodged, you know, you possibly won't get it before the date of final evidence. So, but don't be too concerned about final evidence. What other evidence should you automatically look at? If you've had an EHCP for a number of years, you feel that provision is not being or not good enough and not meeting the needs of your child, then I would like to see the annual reviews going back 5 years, perhaps see have the objective changed, has anything changed, if there's no change, is the gap between the child and young person widening? I mean, quite often that's what you see where provision isn't meeting needs properly. So look at annual reviews. Any reports, medical reports or anything like that, I would look at. Also look at all of school reports going back. Those can be very useful to see as well. So sometimes they're not any use. Because I think one of the problems with teachers, particularly primary school teachers, is there must be, I don't know, it must be part of teacher training for primary schools, that they always, they always dwell on the very positives. And the fact that this child can't read, you know, you'll see, I've seen a report, a school report from a primary school, oh, Jemima's a delight to teach, she's a delight to have in class, and she always takes part in everything. And then you look and you think, actually, she can't read, and she's aged 8. Because so it just seems to be the way that a lot of primary school reports are done. That they don't actually necessarily help you when you're looking for additional provision or an EHCP, because they are so positive. So I've dealt with final evidence submission. I've already dealt with, yes, sorry.
Can I just ask a question? With the timeline, is it like the EHCP that like the appeal is registered and within 6 weeks the LA need to respond? Is there a time
The tribunal will issue a time frame, and it depends on how many appeals they've got. So the length of time you have to respond to an appeal, or the local authority has to respond to appeal, depends how quickly the tribunal process the claim. And when your final, I've already said, your final hearing day may well be a year ahead, 14 months ahead. So it depends. Yeah. Sometimes now, because you don't have final hearing for 12 to 14 months, it does seem to me that, how can I put this, that the tribunal is still not, when they give your final evidence, it's still too far away from the final hearing, because they've got their time frame. So they're asking for final evidence in, say, September, and the hearing is not until next July. It's mad. So they do need to do something there. Working documents. I want to say a bit about working documents, because working documents is something that I think a lot of parents section F, and you've appealed against section I, and you might have also put in the extended appeal for social care. The working document is essentially your EHCP, section B and F, and possibly I. And the section B is what the local authority have suggested, and that's your working document version 1. You will have gone through working document version 1, which is the EHCP the local authority gave to you, and you will have wanted to make a lot of amendments. And there is this insane sort of grid for putting in your amendments. So, and I frequently, almost every day I look at a working document, I have to remind myself of what the grid is. So local authorities amendments which parents don't agree is italics. Celine's going to tell me if I've got this wrong. Parents' amendments which are not agreed are in bold. Where the local authority agree the parents' amendments, they're bold and underlined.
No, if every side agrees, it's out of bold.
Okay.
Normal text underlined.
That's what, sorry. The local authority agrees, a bold comes out and it's underlined.
Yeah.
Then you might have deletions which are either agreed or not agreed. What the tribunal now like to see just before the final hearing is what they call a clean copy, which is everything that's been agreed is neither in bold, underlined or italics. And all you're left with is what is still in issue, which hopefully by the time you get to the tribunal is not very much, because although I've said that mediation might not be that useful, you don't stop discussing matters with the local authority. So this EHCP goes backwards and forwards, a bit like a passport. Everybody makes amendments, some are agreed, some are not, and sometimes it's a tiny word that's not agreed, and sometimes, you know, you think, is that going to make any difference to the outcome I want, and if it doesn't, should I agree it? It's really the provision and the placement you need to home in on. But so the working document version 2 is generally the parents, then it goes back to the local authority. Version 3 is the local authority looking at parents' amendments and deciding whether they agree or not. Then they might agree some and not others, so then it comes back to the parents, that's version 4, they might accept or not accept. And so it goes on. By the time you get to tribunal, you might be on version 16, or even more, because it goes backwards and forwards. Is everybody with me? So what is a working document? It is basically an EHCP with sections B and F. They tend to not have the other sections of the EHCP because you can't appeal them, tribunal's not bothered by them, and they don't look at them really. So it's going to be that. A tribunal generally likes to see all of the versions so they can see what's agreed and what's not agreed, and they can see the journey that's gone backwards and forwards. But they then on the day want the clean copy as to what is left. I know that some parents find it difficult with working documents, that it's not straightforward, but what you do, just look, and if you're wanting certain provision, the local authority is saying no, look and check that you've got some evidence for whatever it is you want, firstly, and then say to the local authority, I've got evidence, I want this in. If they try and say, well, that's an independent report, we're not putting it in, which some still do, just say, well, that's irrelevant, it's an independent report, they've made this recommendation, I want it in. If you've actually, in the appeal process, they'll generally cave on that. If, and I had a parent ring up the other day saying, I think my child could really benefit from one-to-one horse riding lessons for the disabled. And I said, what was your evidence for that? And they said, well, I just think it'd be nice. Sort of, you're not going to get that because it's your evidence, you think it might be nice and it because the tribunal's not likely to order that, so you might not get that. So just think about the wording go back. Also, sometimes, if you've got very detailed and lengthy reports, copying and pasting a whole chunk from a report to put in a working document, you don't need to do that. You can just summarise the main points from the independent report, put it in the working document, so that it is this document that can be picked up by somebody who doesn't know the child and is going to teach them. I personally think it's really, really hard in a mainstream secondary school, where children sometimes have 10 different teachers, and it's expected that each of those 10 teachers are going to have read and digested the EHCP and the K reports. It's too many people. I think it can often work in a mainstream primary school where you have one teacher generally, and they don't move around very much, and they haven't got to have all their equipment, but I think it's...
Would you reference the report taken?
Yes, very good. Yes. Do you reference? Yes. So I would like to have in mine that Jemima should have 40 minutes of direct occupational therapy from a qualified and experienced occupational therapist who has experience of working with children with similar needs. See the report of Mr. Smith, page 49, paragraph 40. Yeah, absolutely reference. Very good point. Thank you. Yes. Oh, we still have a prize we haven't given yet. So, for the next competition, the person who, and you all get to have a go, except for Greg, Catherine and Celine. I said that EHCPs, when they were brought in, were meant to be a short document that people can pick up and know what the main difficulties of their child are and the main provision. Yeah? You can all have one guess, and it's going to be a number. What do you think is the longest EHCP I've ever seen? Gentleman at the front can start.
60.
Thank you. Celine, you'll have to make a note.
Okay.
Sorry, I gave you no warning. Okay.
The longest pages.
Yes, number of pages. What's the longest number of pages?
55.
55. Lady. I would say 454. Okay. Wow. For the HCP. 454. The next one.
120.
120.
I'll go 135.
Lady at the back.
I want to say 115.
115.
I know it's similar, but yeah, 115.
Lady on the back. 95. 75. 88.
Oh my god, wild as well, 300.
78. 78.
84.
84.
127.
Well, and the winner is, drum roll. The answer is 126. So this lady. Got 127. But lucky you were the last, because I'm about to go, yes! And I thought it was okay to do that because you were last. Yes, but 300, good grief! So, but 126, and what use is that? It's useless, really, because it's too long, too wordy. And in fact, tribunals now are very much of the view that they need to be more concise. And, you know, if you have independent reports, they'll often kind of go to great detail about the fine motor skills difficulties or the gross motor skills difficulties, whatever. Why not just have, Jemima has significant fine motor skills difficulties? That probably will do it. One thing I haven't mentioned today, and I think I've gone off piece slightly, is that if you have a need in section B, Jemima has fine motor skills difficulties, you must have provision in F. It's like a book. So, fine motor skills difficulties, what's the provision? OT. Social communication difficulties in B, what's the provision in F? Speech and language therapy. And that could be, if it's social communication difficulties, then it can be that it's in a small group, no more than 6, with children with similar difficulties, which is taken by a speech and language therapist or someone who's experienced and trained. Okay?
Bev, I might just have to move you off appeals because we've got 20 minutes and the last 4 slides are important.
Okay, right. So we've got to...
If you go straight to annual review.
Okay, annual reviews. I think I've already mentioned, we're moving on swiftly. I've got a timekeeper here who's keeping me on track because I'm doing my piece. Annual reviews, really, really important. I've already mentioned them. They happen annually, or they should do, and if they don't, you need to be chasing the school. It's the school that arranges the annual review. They then inform the local authority, and the local authority chooses to come or not come. Some local authorities will pitch up to some annual reviews, but they often don't turn up. Where they'll pitch up is where it's a transition year generally, so it's year 6 going to year 7, or post-16, post-19. Or suddenly you as a parent have said, actually, I don't think this mainstream school needs anymore, I'd rather like this expensive independent school down the road. Then they'll pitch up. So often they don't come, it's up to them. Now, 2 weeks from the date of the annual review, the school must send a report to the local authority. And again, if you're a parent, make sure you ask the school for copies of what they send to the local authority. Because some schools, they're very busy, they forget to send the paperwork in. You need to be sure within 2 weeks of that annual review they're sending the paperwork in to the local authority. 4 weeks from the date, 4 weeks from the date of the annual review, if they agree to amend, they must issue a proposed amended EHCP. Now I'm going to pause there, because if you go back about 2 years, what happened was local authorities would carry out an annual review, and maybe a year or so later they'd send out a notice saying we're not going to amend, or we're going to amend, and here's an amended EHCP. Sometimes it'd be a year. It was of no use to man or beast. So a judicial review case was taken against Devon County Council, because we had a huge number of cases with Devon where they were just taking a year or 2 years to issue the documents following an annual review. And the problem with that was, unless they issue the documents, we're going to amend, here's the amended EHCP, or we're not going to amend, parents had no right of appeal. So what it meant was there were huge swathes, particularly in Devon, of children, young people, where the parents had no right of appeal because the local authority didn't send out notices following the annual review. And the code of practice, which basically deals with SEN cases, was silent on the point of time limits. So a judicial review case was brought against Devon for their failure to deal with annual reviews in a timely manner, and as a result of that Devon case, we now have time limits. That case has benefited each and every SEN child or young person in England. And yes, we did it. Well, actually, it was my colleagues. It was a couple of colleagues of mine who were having a discussion saying, this is mad, what can we do? And I'll put my hand up. I said, I don't think we can do anything, because the code of practice, the statute is silent. And we had a solicitor with us who said, no, I think we should consider judicial review, because this is an important point. And so that's the Devon case, which was a great case to be involved with and was successful. So that just kind of brings me on just briefly to the whole judicial review and how it intertwines with education, and it can be a benefit to parents and young people. And I shall come back to that in a minute. So 8 weeks from the date of the decision letter, if they agree to amend, they're going to issue the final amended EHCP. And once they either amend the EHCP or say they're not going to amend the EHCP, you get another right of appeal. So if you're not happy, that gives you the right to appeal. And one of the problems in Wales is, I think it's still the case, that annual reviews, you get no right of appeal. So you can go on and on and on, and even following an annual review, you have no right of appeal. So dates for your diary. If you have an EHCP, phase transfer, child or young person transfer to secondary, the local authority have to issue the amended EHCP by the 15th of February, and that's really important because it's the 1st of March that those pupils who don't have an EHCP get told. So children, young people with an EHCP get told 2 weeks before. Do you see how that works? Do you see how I said you get priority if you have the EHCP? Because you should be told by the 15th of February. If the child person, that's a post-6, no, that's the wrong way round actually. is the wrong way around. Yes, it's under 16 is the 15th of February, and post 16 is the 31st of March, so that is the wrong way around. You need to amend that.
I will amend that.
Yeah. Apologies there. So if your post 16 is the 31st of March, now I remember one year a young person got their post 16 got their amended EHCP in April, and it was for September. They appealed, so they got it on something like the 3rd or 4th of April. They appealed by the 5th or 6th. And their appeal was originally listed the following March, which was of no use to Mandelbeast because they were meant to be starting their new post-16 placement in September. So you can see how the whole time frame of EHCPs can work against parents. So you really have to watch the time limits, and if the local authority is not complying with time limits, whether it's post-annual review or it's a transition, it's 11, it's going into secondary education, or it's post-16 or post-19, then you need to be on it straight away, and it may be that it's judicial review. Post-16, now, post-16 I've touched on slightly. Post-16 to 18 is a bit, but the post-18, post-19 gets really interesting because then, and I've already mentioned it, you can bring in the costs of social care because you're going to say that young person wants to live independently, even if they wouldn't if they stayed at home. What you say for the purposes of an appeal is, well actually, this is post-19 where I deal with young people. They're all saying, I don't want to live with mum and dad anymore because mum picks all my dirty washing off the floor and does everything for me. I want to learn how to do all these things myself, and I want to live independently. Also, mobility training becomes much more important in the post-19 if they haven't got it. Travel may be an issue in the sense that if they haven't got any travel skills at all, particularly post-19, again that comes into mobility training. When you're looking at post-19, local authorities, even in the most absurd situations, will suggest local colleges because it's cost effective. It's becoming much more difficult. As I say, I've done education work for over 30 years, and every year local authorities become much more difficult and much more squeezed for money. They're having a real there's a real problem with post-16 transport, which I'm not going to go to in detail here, but 16 to 18, local authorities in many areas now, they're not paying for any transport 16 to 18, whereas they will under 16. There's a lot of difficulties with travel there, and I say I won't go into difficulties because it's quite a complex issue. If the local authority name their local mainstream college, and a lot of these local mainstream colleges now are absolutely huge, and they cater for a range of students, from those who go there to do A-levels and will go on to sort of top universities such as Sussex, or they will be looking at them very much vocational skills, or they might just be independent. They might have children, young people with significant learning difficulties doing independent living programs. So there's a big range, and they may be huge, but the local authorities are tending to name those. I've already independent school or college. One of the things is generally. This lady's a bit hot, shall we just... generally, you have to have evidence that the school or college is going to offer a place. I've had many parents ring me up and say, oh, I think that Cathedral School will meet my child's needs. I really want the local authority to name that in the HCP. And I say, have you got an offer of a place there? Well, no, the school say it's full and they're not sure they can meet needs. You're not going to win. You've got to have the place and you've got to have evidence of it, okay? Is the independent school or college section 41 approved? And the difference is this, section 41 means that essentially they've got an agreement with the Department of Education And a tribunal could, even if the school or college is not keen on or saying they're full, for example, they could order that the child or young person go there. Now, generally, if a school or college says we can't meet needs because the needs, I'm going to give an example, if you have a young person who has a visual impairment and the parents want that person to go to a specialist college for the deaf, you can see that that college might say, I'm not sure we can meet needs. Tribunal will generally go with the school or college if they're saying they can't meet needs. If they say they're full, they might say, well, where else, we haven't got anywhere else to place this person in the area, and they might order that that young person goes to that school or college. Although generally, if they're independent, it is harder to persuade a tribunal that your child or young person should go to the school or college. Always look at, it's quite important whether it's an independent mainstream or whether it's an independent special. So do look carefully at that. With independent special schools in particular, one of the things that can make it very inviting for a child, not inviting, but can show and demonstrate that it will meet a young person's needs more, is because it has on-site therapists. And what that means, what does on-site therapist mean? On-site therapist means that the school employs speech and language therapist, physiotherapist, or occupational therapist, something like that. Now, what happens in a lot of maintained, when I say maintained, I mean local authority special schools, is they don't have any therapists on site. They buy in from the NHS, who may come one week and not the next, and it's very much more of an ad hoc provision. Some maintained special schools do employ therapists. So if you're looking at a specialist school, I would be asking, do you have any on-site therapists? And if yes, how many days a week? So equivalent do they have of speech and language and OT in particular? And if you had a child or young person with cerebral palsy, I would expect them to have a physiotherapist as well. Depending on the child or young person's needs, it might be you'd want hydrotherapy. Again, if you had a child or young person with cerebral palsy, you might be looking to and expect hydrotherapy to be there regularly. So look at what the special school can offer. Now I'm going to pause there for a minute. Everybody probably is painfully aware there is a chronic shortage of special schools in the country. And I think it's much more difficult in rural areas because the nearest special school that meets your needs might be 2 counties across or an hour or so's travel. And that's a real problem. So I've dealt with quite a few cases recently where in certain areas, and it actually it can be in urban areas such as around Bristol, all special schools are full, whether they're maintained or independent. So what is happening is parents are saying, actually, mainstream schools no longer meeting needs, I really need a special placement, and they're going to the maintained special school, which says no, we're full. The local authority have got to make some provision, and so those cases are going to tribunal, and even though, let's just say, the special school has provision for 80, and they're already at 94, a tribunal might order a further pupil in, because they've got to go somewhere, and there is a problem which there may be a change on SEN funding going forward, but in particular, a huge number of special schools need to be built. Now, for those who are a bit younger than me, the whole way that education and SEN has been dealt with has changed over the years. And one of the issues is that in the late 90s and early noughties in particular, there was this idea that we need to include we need to have an inclusive education and include all children with special needs and disabilities in mainstream school. Great aspiration. What has realistically happened, in my view, is that those children have been included in mainstream but isolated, and it's been of no benefit to them whatsoever. The whole thing has not worked. So a lot of special schools in the early noughties, certainly I know in the Bristol area and Gloucester area, a lot of special schools were closed down. because they wanted them to be included in mainstream school. And of course, it's just not worked. And now we're starting to build more special schools. So historically, the way we've dealt with children with special needs has changed. And just to, if I'm giving a history lesson as well, when special needs tribunals came in, and I think I'm right, in about 1998, prior to that, there was no independent special needs tribunals. If you didn't agree with the provision being proposed for your child or your person with special needs, then you appealed to a little appeal panel which was set up by the local authority. Guess what? 98% of appeals, parents were unsuccessful. Local authorities were successful in 98% of cases. And parents were getting fed up. And the only recourse they had was judicial review. That's going to the High Court in London. Judicial review is really complex and very costly. So the government thought what we need, instead of having all these parents bringing judicial review, was set up an independent special needs tribunal. And parents can go there. And so the special needs tribunal now, about 98% of parents are successful. So that's the difference. It is completely independent. I'm just going to say a few words before we finish about, I've said that the purpose of an EHCP really is to summarise your child's needs and provision, and if the local authority don't make the provision in section F, and we are seeing that, your recourse is generally judicial review or threatening judicial review, usually a threatening letter. If your child says in the EHCP they should have 30 minutes or 40 minutes of speech and language or OT per week and they're not getting it, then a letter to the local authority reminding them of their statutory duties, usually they will do it. It's very rare. I did once have a local authority say, South Gloucestershire I think, said, we can't find any speech and language therapists in the area, terribly sorry, we can't comply with our statutory duty. So we then found a speech and language therapist who was 100 miles away and wanted to be paid something like £70 an hour for her travel, and was going to be this. And I said, here's a speech and language therapist, you need to employ this one. That speech and language, they then miraculously found one that could provide the speech and language therapist more locally. So if you're saying the local authority is not making provision and they say they can't find anyone to do it, you probably do need to say, well, here's one, it might be 100 miles away, but you've got to do that. The other way judicial review comes in, and Greg might want to say a few words in a minute, is where I've said all along that throughout today that local authority, you're lucky to get a word edgerated with me, mind you, but the local authority, there are time limits on when they've got to decide on statutory assessment or issuing an EHCP or responding to the annual review. It's when they don't comply with those time limits, you can then, if they don't comply, they're breach of their statutory duty, and you can either, to begin with, send what's called a pre-action protocol letter, which is basically threatening judicial review. And I would say 98% of those pre-action letters are successful. The local authority immediately does. I mean, I know that recently we had one where the local authority had not carried out the statutory assessment in time, and they said they hadn't got any ed sites, and we said, right, we're going to issue next week if you don't do it, and they've now given a date for the ed site. It's about 2 weeks hence, but you can't really justify going to the High Court when they actually have now given a date. Even though they're late, in fact, the local authority said, put our hands up, we accept, we've not complied with statutory time limits, we're terribly sorry, we had difficulty with the ed site, but we're going to do it in 2 weeks. So, but at least unless you do those pre-action letters, sometimes the local authority will not comply with those statutory time limits. I think that one area where it's utterly shocking is you've got the transition, so whether it's primary to secondary or post-16, post-19, local authorities, I've seen local authorities who've issued, no, they haven't yet issued the amended EHCP to say where that child or young person's going, even though they're meant to have started in September, and we're now on, September the 28th? Is it 28th?
It's 27th, so.
27th, so it's the 27th of September, and you're still getting local authorities issuing an amended EHCP. It's absolutely shocking. But I had somebody yesterday, and they said, well, what's going to, because the local authority is desperate, because the parents have found a place at a specialist college, child is really really complex needs. And the local authorities say we need a bit longer to try and find somewhere. They're desperate not to name the parental choice. But that child or young person should have been in education in September. It's mad. But we are getting a lot of EHCPs for post-11, post-16, post-19 being issued in July, August and September. So if you think about the fact that you've then got possibly a year, even if you shorten it, at best you're going to get January, February. And so that young person misses out on a whole year's education, which brings me back to one of my earlier points is, you know, if you have a child or young person with special needs, you have to be on it all the time. It's a long and winding, difficult road. And is that Milton Johnson? No, I'm not sure. Anyway, you do need to keep on it all the time. And if the local authority is not complying with, or was it Beatles? It was Beatles. Thank you. It was the Beatles. So it's not Milton Johnson. It's Beatles. Long winding road. Sorry.
There's a similar out to children.
Oh, thank you. It's a similar out to children. Yellow Brick Road.
Yeah.
So it's a long winding road, and you've got to be on it the whole time. But if the local authority do not comply with any of those statutory time limits, or they fail to make provision they should because it's in section F, then your recourse is judicial review, which is different. Greg, do you want to come up here and say a few words? Or?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Let's make sure.
Shall I finish the live stream?
Thank you very much. So tough act to follow up.
Can I just pause for 1 minute? Because we have breaking news. Everybody in this.
I'll sit.
It's exciting.
No.
I'm only going to be 1 minute, right? So I said, in the High Court today, is a case that we brought, and I can't quite believe it. It was brought by a colleague, Keith Lomax, who is a solicitor, who sadly got cancer this year, and sadly passed away a few weeks ago. And he fought long and hard for this safety valve case. And initially, the High Court said there's no case to answer, and the case essentially evolves around the government, the previous government, under the Conservative government, trying to limit the amount of money that local government has to spend on SEN. And the case was brought by the parent of one child who perceived that they could be affected by a huge reduction in the monies being sent to local authorities. And so it was called safety valve because the government of the day, not the current government, were trying to limit the amount of money spent on special needs. And this initially the High Court said there's no the permission to bring judicial review was refused. And we then had an oral application today before the High Court where the court reconsidered with the people being present and arguing the case as to why this was really important to parents of special needs children not to have the funding given to local authorities limited and cut significantly, and permission has been granted. So that's quite a coup. And I think that, you know, I think Keith will be looking down rather pleased. It's not the end of the road because permission means it just goes to a further oral hearing, although it's a bit complex. But it's a really, really important case because the safety valve, sorry, I'm a bit emotional after that. He really felt strongly that the safety valve case should be challenged because the idea of, you know, the government reducing that amount of money. So that's great news. That's breaking news, folks. Now over to Greg, sorry.
Thank you. So as I said, really big shoes to follow for Beverley. Thank you so much for Celine and Beverley for such a wonderful talk so far today. So, what I thought I could do, Beverley and Celine, just to check how much time do I have, because I'm aware folks might have to leave. It's a bit of a graveyard shift, Friday afternoon, so I can tailor it to how long
I think we maybe have 5-10 minutes before
Perfect.
people might need to do the school pickup.
5-10 minutes.
If anybody has to leave the school pickup, then obviously don't abandon your school.
So, what I thought I could do, I've learned very early make it all about audience participation as well, so hopefully we can make it relevant to certain circumstances. And I thought maybe just to summarise about what judicial review is, although Beverley in an inimitable style has explained that already, and then how we can make it probably relevant to certain, without going into the granular detail of specifics, but how we can make it relevant to what effectively is a really long, hard-fought process, like Beverley has said, 14, 15 months to finally get that EHCP either issued or amended after the local authorities made that decision, what seems historically a long time ago. So my background, just very quickly, similar to Celine, similar to Beverley, is SEN tribunal work, so I represent parents, young people and adults with the whole process that has been gone through, and then we finally get that EHCP, and we think the local authority is then, because the local authority, I'll use Herefordshire as an example because we're here, has the administrative and financial responsibility to basically do what it says in the tin, which is ensure that the provision, which is a good example that Beverley has spoken about, is secured in the Education, Health and Care Fund. So just on that point, does anybody, if you don't mind me asking this specific question, does anybody, child or young person or adult, have an EHCP in the room at all, or might make it a bit easier? Okay, sorry, there's a lady at the back there, so fantastic. So is it that, what we see a lot is that the statutory timescales just aren't adhered to. So within this sort of pamphlet that you've got with you, I noticed that there was almost like little arrows on one page which talk about timelines, and this all is statutory. So what can we do? Because basically the tribunal, all the tribunal can do is basically say we're only here to look at whether an EHCP should be issued, a needs assessment undertaken, and an EHCP, what that should look like, the key that Beverley spoke about. They can't do anything about failures. The failures have to be looked at by that word there, judicial review. And what that is, in a nutshell, is a High Court judge looking at an alleged failure by a statutory body, which just happens to be a local authority in this case. So I'll just pause there just to make sure that everybody's just about okay with what I'm talking about. Is anybody, a few head nods, a few head shakes? Okay, so I think we're okay with that. So the things that come out that we see all the time is failure to do the statutory things, failure to secure the provision in the EHCP, and in a nutshell what you then have to do is threaten the local authority as the statutory body with legal action. And they have a very short time frame because you can't mess about with disabled children. You fought so hard. So you give the local authority as the statutory body a maximum of 14 days to sort things out. And the beauty of it is there are other ways, the local authority may say there's other mechanisms, that they would say there's other alternatives. You don't really have to go down the road of judicial review. But actually the alternatives is something called a local government ombudsman. Okay, and that's a really long and drawn out process. And you have to go through different stages to even get to there. Whereas actually what we want to do is hold the local authority to account. So send a threatening legal letter, as Beverley said. It's a binary decision. So to use the example of the lady, if you don't mind, in the back row, who said that her child's got an education, health and care plan. If there's anything in there which isn't being secured, so you might find the NHS might not have delivered the speech therapy, as Beverley said before, the occupational therapy, or you might find that for various reasons it might be impossible to ask a child or to ensure that a child is actually even able to go to the school in the first place. The remedy, you can't use the tribunal, their job is finished. You have to threaten the local authority. And let's say hypothetically the local authority, like Beverley said, 90% of the time, they sort it out as if by magic. Your speech therapy, your occupational therapy, your physiotherapy that was previously unable to be secured is now, as if by magic, delivered. It's only a forward-facing thing, they can't look back retrospectively. But then you have that resolution within the local authority. Fantastic, moving forward is being delivered. If that doesn't sort it out, the next step is, well, we've given them an opportunity, and as Beverley sort of said, well, they either didn't respond, or the response went in the bin, or you look at the response and it isn't good enough, it hasn't made any odds whatsoever. The beauty of Watkins, if you may say, and judicial review and all this letter before action stuff that we've spoken about, is it has to be funded. It has to be funded to take action against the local authority. And the way that this can be funded is through legal aid. And that's really important. So, as Beverley said about having a glass of wine this evening and the little things to remember, legal aid still exists for education law. So I've finally got there. So if Beverley has sent a letter for action, the local authority hasn't done anything or has done very little, you then need to fund the claim in the High Court. And I appreciate this is becoming a bit like an education law lecture, I hadn't meant to at all. But legal aid can be put in the name of the child or young person because the claim has to be funded. And why that's important is that A, we don't have to pay. The legal aid agency, you have to make an application. You have to go to a law firm with a legal aid agency contract. So you make the application online. It has to be a special system. Watkins has the system. And you apply for an emergency certificate. Again, just using the example of failure to secure provision in time, because that's relatively not straightforward, but not as difficult as others. And you get an emergency certificate back in the name of the child within, all being well, 72 hours. And that will literally do what it says in the tin, which is a certificate that allows a certain amount of funding to be issued for the solicitor and the barrister to work on a claim against the local authority. They've had their opportunity, they didn't respond, or the response was rubbish, to actually take the steps further. But judicial review, without going into sort of too legalistic parlance, is what they call a remedy of last resort. So you have to show that you followed this blasted judicial review pre-action protocol. You can't just go in heavy-handed and go straight for a High Court application. And this is the granular detail, and it's the only way really that local authorities will sit up and take notice and sort this out. So if you are at the stage where you sent your letter before action, insufficient or poor, you've engaged the services of someone like Beverley or Celine, and they're saying, yeah, look, we've got a realistic case here, we've got a good case. And you engage the services of a barrister through the solicitor, and they're like, yeah, you've got a good case, I can't believe the local authority hasn't done this. And you're at the stage of getting that emergency legal aid certificate. You then have to basically ask for more money, if I'm honest, because the legal aid agency will only give you a certain amount. But it's going to be, if I'm frank, a bad or poor or irrational local authority will let it get to the stage of lodging, because it's only permission, a claim for judicial review in the High Court. So it's a lot more technical, a lot more complex than SEN tribunals. But it's the only way really that local authorities will sort out your individual issues, having fought so hard to get the provision. There's lots of other stuff in there, like I said, the statutory timescales, transport, this whole Children and Families Act, I'm looking for it, it's not there, legislation. It's all about time frames, and it's a binary thing. They've either done it or they haven't done it. Your child, just to go one step further, suitable alternative education. We're seeing lots of children unfortunately unable to attend school for various reasons, anxiety, mental health issues, things which weren't prevalent in my day, but are very real issues for children and young people now. And the local authority has to do something. They have to provide education by way of be it home tuition, online learning, and that could be through a variety of reasons. And that's illness, exclusion, or other. So other would be a catch-all provision. So it's really for the local authority to understand how they need to be providing that sort of home tuition. Again, so those are the two big things that we see a lot in education law. And then you've got the policy stuff, which I'll just touch upon really quickly, that Beverley spoke about. So that sort of safety valve thing, and my limited understanding about senior judgment is about local authorities doing deals with the Department for Education to try and reduce the amount of EHCPs that are issued, as long as the Department for Education give them more money. So the high needs funding block has been reduced and reduced and reduced. The Department for Education said, all right, let's think of another local authority, Bedfordshire. We will give you another £500,000 per term, £1.5 million a year, if you reduce the amount of EHCPs that are issued. Unlawful, arguably. Let's see what the High Court decide. So from a policy point of view, if you've got unlawful policies that exist, like going back to, mindful of time, but right to the start where it was, we will only issue an EHCP when we've got an educational psychology report. We'll only agree to assess when we've got a speech and language report. As a policy, that's unlawful. So if you're aware of any policy decisions, probably need it in writing, I know this is on Facebook as well, that you can actually then look at, well that looks a bit unlawful, that might stink a little bit, we need to look at is there a way that we can challenge that, and the remedy is judicial review. So I appreciate I've said a lot there, and